Whenever I listen back to something that I do, it just makes me feel weird.
Hi, my lovely.
Hi.
Welcome to America's Got Talent.
Clapperboard. Picture a stage. The kind that swallows you whole, blinding lights overhead. Thousands of strangers staring forward. Silence pressing down like something heavy. Most adults would crumble just standing there. But on that stage stood a 13-year-old girl from a small English village most Americans couldn't find on a map, wearing a little black leather jacket, a white shirt, and a fedora she gripped like a life raft. Nobody expected what happened next. Nobody could have. Because when Courtney Hadwin opened her mouth, the air in that theater changed. The noise she made didn't belong to a child. It didn't belong to 2018 or even this century. It was ancient and raw, the kind of sound that rises from somewhere deep, somewhere pain has already visited and left its mark. It was the sound of a soul on fire. The judges froze. The audience stopped breathing. And within hours, the entire world would be talking about a girl most of them had never heard of the day before. But fame is never the whole story. And Courtney Hadwin's story, the real one, goes far beyond a viral audition clip. It is a story about a little girl who found her voice before she found her footing, about a dream that survived a crash on a rainy highway at midnight, and about what happens when talent meets hardship and refuses to break. Stay with me, because this story is one you need to hear, from the beginning to the part they don't always tell you. Heselden is not a place people dream about leaving. It is a quiet village in County Durham, in the northeast of England, the kind of place where everyone knows your name and the seasons move slowly. There are no record labels, no talent scouts walking the high street, no stages under city lights. There is community, there is family, and there is the sound of life moving at its own pace. Courtney Hadwin was born into that quietness on May 6, 2004. Her parents, Marie and Paul Hadwin, were hardworking, grounded people who understood the value of nurturing something real. And from the very beginning, what was real about their daughter was her relationship with music. She was not even 3 years old when music first reached her. Her mother played records around the house, soul, blues, rhythm, the kind of music that asks something of you when you hear it. Courtney didn't just hear it. She felt it in her bones. She would raise both hands in the air and move her small body in time, her feet tapping out rhythms she had never been taught. It was instinctive, joyful, something that simply lived inside her. By the time she reached school at 8 years old, her music teacher noticed something unusual. Courtney's voice had a depth that did not match her age. There was texture there, a roughness at the edges that most grown singers spend years trying to find. The teacher put her in the school choir. The weekly rehearsals in the school hall were, for Courtney, not a chore. They were the best part of her week. She threw herself into every song with a commitment that her classmates admired. They started calling her Rocker Girl. She wore the nickname proudly. But Courtney was not satisfied with just performing at school assemblies. She was hungry for more. At 10, she gathered a group of neighborhood children and formed a small musical group they called Durham Soul. Their parents pooled together what they could, guitars, a drum kit, small equipment, and soon the group was performing for anyone who would watch. Local crowds gathered. A reporter from a regional newspaper came to see what all the fuss was about and left to write a headline that read, "A young girl brings soul to County Durham." That article sat on the kitchen table for weeks. Her parents read it again and again. Courtney read it too, understanding for the first time that her voice was not just something she did at home. It was something other people felt. She began training at Schottenhall Theater School, where her mother drove her every weekend without fail. Her new teacher worked on phrasing, breath control, the way to shape a note so that it carries not just sound but emotion. Courtney was meticulous. Before school each morning, she practiced vocal scales alone in her bedroom mirror. She wrote lyrics in notebooks at night. She studied Aretha Franklin, Janis Joplin, and Etta James, voices that had walked through fire and sang about it. She wanted to know how they did it. She wanted to learn everything. By age 12, her ambitions had stretched past the borders of County Durham. She saved her pocket money, dreaming of plane tickets and bigger stages. She wrote goals in a notebook she kept under her pillow. She wanted to sing for people who had never heard her name, and to make them feel, in that moment, like she was singing just for them. She was 12 years old when she wrote those words. In less than a year, she would be standing on the biggest talent stage in America. In the summer of 2018, Courtney Hadwin stepped off a plane in Omaha, Nebraska, carrying a small suitcase, her leather jacket, and a determination she had been building her entire young life. She had never left England before. She had never seen America. She had never stood before an audience of thousands of strangers. None of that mattered. She had come to sing. On the morning of her audition at the CenturyLink Center, the backstage area buzzed with performers of every kind. Acrobats, comedians, singers, dancers, all of them waiting for their moment. Courtney held her fedora in one hand. She took deep, slow breaths. She thought about her mother sitting backstage. She thought about County Durham. She thought about the notebook under her pillow. And then her name was called. She walked onto the stage. Four judges sat under bright lights: Simon Cowell, Heidi Klum, Howie Mandel, and Mel B. Their faces arranged in the practiced neutral expression of people who had seen thousands of acts and been surprised by very few. The audience stirred with polite curiosity. A 13-year-old girl in a leather jacket. Small, quiet-looking. What was she going to do? What she did was sing "Piece of My Heart." And within 30 seconds, the theater was no longer the same place it had been before she opened her mouth. Her voice came out soft at first, and then something shifted, something unlocked, and what poured out of that small body was vast and ancient and wholly unlike anything that stage had heard before. She stomped her foot. She swung her arms. She closed her eyes and let the music take her somewhere, and she took everyone in that building with her. Simon Cowell leaned forward, eyebrows lifted. Heidi Klum sat upright, eyes wide. Howie Mandel covered his mouth with his hand. Mel B leaned in, transfixed. By the time the final chord landed, the theater had exploded. Every person in the building was on their feet. Simon's golden buzzer lit the stage in a cascade of gold confetti, and Courtney stood in the middle of it. Looking up, her fedora clutched to her chest. Her mother, somewhere behind the curtain, weeping with joy she had no words for. In the short interview that followed, Courtney's voice shook as she said simply, "I love to sing. It makes me feel free." It was not a polished answer. It was not calculated or rehearsed. It was exactly true, and that truth touched millions of people who would watch it within hours. Because by that night, the clip was everywhere. By morning, it had more than 10 million views on YouTube. The New York Times wrote about her. The BBC ran features. Headlines called her the voice of a teen Janis Joplin. Her hometown newspaper ran her photo on the front page. Messages came pouring in from Japan, from Brazil, from corners of the world she could not have pointed to on a map. One fan wrote, "Your voice makes me feel alive." Another wrote, "You remind me of my daughter." Courtney read every one of them. She could not stop crying. In the weeks that followed, she returned to Los Angeles for the live shows. She performed "Maybe" by Janis Joplin on a stage framed in glowing arches and deep red light, and the crowd rose to its feet before the song was even over. She appeared on The Ellen DeGeneres Show, where she and Ellen laughed together about missing her dog back in England. She performed on The Tonight Show with Jimmy Fallon, who brought in a live drumbeat behind her as she sang a blues classic. Questlove, Jimmy's legendary bandleader, shook his head in amazed appreciation. Record labels sent offers. Merchandise companies reached out. The world was ready to turn Courtney Hadwin into a product, into a brand, into a phenomenon, and she could feel that pressure beginning to build around her. But every night, she called home, and every time she heard her mother's voice, she remembered why she was there. Not for the fame, for the song. In early October of 2018, Courtney joined a small touring group of fellow America's Got Talent finalists, traveling by bus through the Midwest to perform at theaters in multiple cities. The schedule was packed, the energy was high, and Courtney sat near the window on long drives, reading messages from fans and watching the American landscape scroll past in the dark. She was a 13-year-old girl on a tour bus, thousands of miles from home, doing the things she loved more than anything in the world. Life was, in spite of the exhaustion and the distance and the longing for her dog and her parents, extraordinary. On the night of the accident, The bus was traveling from Minneapolis toward Madison, Wisconsin. It was past midnight. Most of the passengers were resting. Heavy rain had been falling for hours, the kind of steady, relentless rain that makes even experienced drivers careful. Luggage sat in overhead racks. Instrument cases were secured in their padded holders. Outside, Interstate 94 stretched ahead in the dark, slick and shining under highway lights. At a curve in the road, a sudden gust of wind pushed the bus sideways toward the guardrail. The driver braked hard, but the road was slick and the vehicle couldn't be fully controlled. The bus skidded sideways for nearly 20 feet. Overhead cabinets burst open. Cases broke free from their secured positions. There was the sound of metal scraping against metal, the sharp crack of glass, a deep and terrible lurch. Then silence. Courtney felt the impact throw her forward. When the bus came to rest against the guardrail, she sat for a moment in the ringing quiet that follows catastrophe, unsure of what her body was telling her. She stood slowly. Her right knee was wrong, a sharp, nauseating throb. She reached up and felt the warmth of blood on her temple, where she'd struck the luggage rack. Around her, fellow musicians were pulling themselves upright, shaken and pale. The keyboardist held his wrist, face white with pain. The tour manager pressed at his shoulder. Outside, passing motorists had already stopped, shining flashlights through the windows and calling emergency services. Within minutes, the highway was full of red and blue light. 2 ambulances, a fire truck, a highway patrol cruiser. Paramedics moved through the bus quickly and carefully, assessing each person with the calm efficiency of people trained for chaos. When they reached Courtney, they examined her knee and confirmed what the pain had already told her, a fracture. They braced her leg, elevated it, cleaned the cut at her temple, and prepared her for transport. At St. Mary's Hospital in Madison, scans confirmed a fractured right kneecap and a mild concussion. No surgery would be necessary, but she would need 6 weeks of limited movement and consistent physical therapy. The concussion meant strict rest, no screens, no reading for long periods, no strain of any kind. When news of the crash reached the world, it moved fast and hit hard. Social media flooded with messages. Fellow contestants sent videos. Simon Cowell and Heidi Klum recorded personal get-well messages. A fan-created GoFundMe page raised $32,000 in under 48 hours. Tour dates across Wisconsin and Illinois were canceled. Theater managers issued refunds. Many fans asked that their ticket fees be donated directly to her recovery fund instead. 2 days later, Courtney was cleared to fly home. Her parents met her at the airport, folding her into their arms with a gentleness that understood exactly what she had just been through. They drove home in the dark to Heselden, to the familiar smell of her mother's cooking, to the clink of her father's tools in the garage, to the life she had left behind when a plane took her to America, and everything changed. She was home. She was broken in one way,